Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm Massi Bambara, North Bay Market President of Bank of America Merrill Lynch, member of the Commonwealth Club Board of Governors, and your chair for today's program. You can find us on the internet at commonwealthclub.org as well as on Facebook and YouTube. Today, we're pleased to once again present the Walter Hoadley Annual Economic Forecast, named in honor of the club's late past president and longtime board member, Dr. Walter Hoadley. Dr. Hoadley also served most notably as Chief Economist and Vice President of the Bank of America. Today's program is sponsored by the Walter E. Hoadley Memorial Fund and Bank of America Merrill Lynch. So our program today will feature two distinguished speakers with distinct viewpoints. Dr. Brad DeLong, Professor of Economics at the University of California at Berkeley and former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy under President Bill Clinton, and Stephen Moore, Chief Economist at the Heritage Foundation, former economic advisor to Donald Trump and author of the book Trumponomics. Let me say a bit more about each. As Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Policy at the U.S. Treasury from 1993 to 1995, Brad DeLong worked in conjunction with Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers on the Clinton administration's budget, the North American Free Trade Agreement, macroeconomic policy, and health care reform. In addition to serving as a professor of economics at UC Berkeley, Dr. DeLong is a research associate of the National Bureau of Economic Research, a weblogger at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth, and a fellow of the Institute for New Economic Thinking. He previously taught economics at Harvard University, where he received his doctorate, as well as at Boston University and MIT. Stephen Moore served as senior economic advisor to Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign, where he focused on tax reform, regulatory reform, and energy policy. With more than 30 years of experience as an economist, Mr. Moore focuses on the impact of government on business and analyzes shifts in the global economy. In addition to his role at Heritage Foundation, Mr. Moore serves as senior economic analyst at CNN. Previously, he served as a senior economist at the United States Congress Joint Economic Committee and as a senior economics fellow at the Cato Institute. He advised the National Economic Commission in 1987 and served as a research director for President Reagan's Commission on Privatization. Mr. Moore is also a former member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Today, Dr. DeLong and Mr. Moore will be in conversation with Dr. David Batstone, Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the University of San Francisco School of Management. Professor Batstone was previously a private equity banker in the technology industry and has been called one of the country's leading authorities on ethics in the business world. He is the founder and managing director of Just Business, a social impact investment firm, and was one of the founding team members of Business 2.0 magazine. So please welcome Brad DeLong, Stephen Moore, and David Batstone.
Thank you. All right, well, we're in for some fun time here. Two very bright and accomplished economists who share different views and have some overlap. I was surprised as I got to know them. So it'll be, keep an open mind. Take your political filters off for a little bit and really try to get to the root of some great ideas, right, for the future of America and what's going to make our nation truly great again. And on that basis, Stephen, your great book here, Trumponomics, I spent this week looking at it, and I didn't realize that there was a very kind of rooted philosophy to the Trump's economy, and you've been one of the architects of that. And the tax cut was, of course, one of the principal pillars of that philosophy. So tell me, we're maybe 8-9 months into that tax cut. Has it accomplished what you hoped it would? And where do you think it deviated, if it did, from your intention?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to come to San Francisco and speak at the Commonwealth Club. It's a real privilege and honor to be here, so I appreciate the opportunity. And Brad, good to see you again. We debated on TV and so on, and so it's nice to meet you in person. I saw the president on Wednesday, as a matter of fact, and I said to him, I said, Mr. President, this tax bill is working out even better than we thought when we drafted the whole thing. And I believe that's true. I mean, we didn't think that we would see the kind of phenomenal, I didn't think it would work so well so quickly. And, I think if you look at kind of the objective evidence of where the economy is today, I do a lot of debates on CNN and other shows. And, after we passed the tax, I said, look, we don't have to debate this anymore. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Let's see if it works or not. Let's see what results we got. And so what we've tried to do, just so you know, I'm not going to speak too long on this, but the real objective of what we wanted to do was fix our business tax system. That's where we felt we were most efficient. We were uncompetitive. We were at a 40% marginal tax rate on our businesses. If you look at what's happened over the last 25 or 30 years with other countries, when we started, when you were at the Treasury, other countries actually had higher tax rates than we did. Over the ensuing next 20 years, those rates went down, 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 down. And so we got into a situation where we just weren't competitive on our business tax system. We were at 40%. The rest of the world was, 20, 22%. That, we used to tell, then Donald Trump, that this is like a 20% Head Start program for every country that we compete with. And we did want to make America great again. We want to make sure that America is the most competitive place in the world to do business. So we wanted to cut that rate to at least where the rest of the world is so that we would have, more competitive situation. The other thing that Donald Trump always insisted upon when we talked about this with him was he said, I want to make sure that every one of the 27 million small businesses in the United States get a tax cut as well. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, we feel very strongly about cutting the individual rates, because I think most of you understand this, but a lot of Americans don't understand, because they're not tax experts, that small business owners, for the most part, 90% of them, they don't pay a corporate income tax. They pay their taxes through the individual code, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to cut the rates. Has it worked? By the way, the other big component of this that we felt very strongly about was immediate expensing. Allow a business, if a business wants to build a factory or purchase more trucks or equipment or build a structure, that they could write that off in the first year rather than have to depreciate over 5 or 10 or 20 years, because we thought that would be like steroid injections into the economy. So has it worked? Look, I think if you look at what's happened with employment, if you look at what's happened with business investment, which has been strong year over year, last year we're at 7%. That's a very healthy number. If you look at what's happening to wages, one of the points we made over and over to Donald Trump is the best way to raise wages in the short term. Obviously, in the long term, you want better skilled and better talented and better educated workers. But if you want to have higher wages, you've got to have more capital investment by businesses, because workers are the ones who actually benefit when businesses spend. So yeah, we're really happy with the results. We got the best, in my opinion, the best labor market in 50 years today. We have 7 million, let me say that, 7 million more jobs today than businesses to fill them. That we've never had a situation like that before. I was joking with the president. I said, Mr. President, stop creating so many jobs. We don't have enough workers to fill them. That's why we need immigration. So I think it's been positive. It's been positive for shareholders. It's been positive for workers, and it's been positive for the overall U.S. economy.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to get to immigration.
Hey, there's a Trump fan here.
Yeah, there is a clap. Very good. Brad, that's a pretty rosy view of the tax cut. Do you share that?
I think the economy's pretty good. I think the tax cut hasn't fulfilled what it was supposed to do. 15 months ago, you had the boosters, Robert Barro from Harvard, the Stanford gang, John Taylor, Mike Boskin, George Shultz, John Kogan, all writing op-eds in the Wall Street Journal, confidently predicting that if the tax cut were passed, we'd have not 7% growth in investment, we'd have 25% growth in investment this year. We'd have an extra $800 billion worth of investment in plant and equipment, in machinery, and inventories in the United States this year. And it simply hasn't happened. And I think there are a couple reasons it hasn't happened, the big one of which was that the Republicans would not deal with the Democratic factions that wanted a corporate tax cut and wanted to pass it through the so-called reconciliation process, which means, like the 2001 tax cut, it expires within a decade. And so it creates a great deal of uncertainty about what the future of the tax code would be. And so, like the 2001 tax cut, it's actually not changing what businesses are doing as much as a permanent shift would. That we actually don't have businesses taking all the money they've gotten from reduced corporate taxes and using it to build more plant and buy more equipment. Instead, we've seen a large, extraordinary orgy of stock buybacks. And 4 times since 1980, presidents have sold tax bills as things that are going to generate a lot of extra investment in America and boost long-run growth. We had Reagan in 81, we had Clinton in 93, we had Bush in 2001, now we have Trump 2017. And yet, if you adjust for the effect of the short-term business cycle, if you adjust for fluctuations up or down in employment, investment in America fell after Reagan 1981 as a lot of money that would otherwise have gone to businesses went to feed the government deficit instead. Investment fell after Bush 2001, cyclically adjusted as well. It rose after Clinton put his stuff through. That was the one thing that seriously worked, although there's an argument over how much it was good policy and how much it was Silicon Valley. Right, the extraordinary fall in the price of computer equipment that was driving it all. I think it's half and half. We can disagree about this. It looks as though Trump today is going to be a lot more like Bush 2001. That the people who now have models are not forecasting any jump. The Congressional Budget Office has taken a look back at the past year and has said we'll get maybe 1% higher growth over the first 5 years and we'll give all that back in the second 5 years. The people who actually track the money flow say that yes, it's a substantial tax cut to those who own lots of stock, that is to the rich, but that 1/3 of those are foreigners. And so Americans' incomes are actually going to drop as a result of the marginal effects of the tax cut because, the taxpayers will have to pay for it somehow because there's not going to be enough of a boost to economic growth to pay for a significant part of it. And a whole bunch of the gains are going to people who don't live here and never will. Now, if you and yours are each making more than $500,000 a year in California, it's less elsewhere. It's less elsewhere because elsewhere, most of you do not get dinged by the reduction in your ability to deduct the state and local taxes. So that there's a tranche of your income that you pay tax on once to the state, and then not having gotten that income, you still have to pay tax on it again to the feds. That's what drives it up to $500,000 or so for the average California citizen. If you're a California citizen making more than $500,000, it's a good thing for you. Yes, it is a tax cut. Is it good for everybody else? Is it good for the economy as a whole? It really doesn't look like it, right? It really looks as though the money the corporations are getting back are going to stock buybacks. And there's an additional diversion of the savings flow to fund the government budget deficit. And that a decade from now, we'll look back and we'll say, just as in 1985, investment in America was at a remarkable low for a boom because the Reagan deficits were starving Midwestern manufacturing of finance because of high interest rates. That people 10 years from now will look back at 5 years and say, I guess that Trump's tax cut actually didn't produce any boost to investment in America. And this is really unfortunate because we had an opportunity to do a corporate tax cut that could have boosted investment in America significantly and could have been a significant win-win for America as a whole. But McConnell and Ryan wanted to ram through what they could ram through the reconciliation process without dealing. And the reconciliation process produces bad and inconsistent policies that create uncertainty. But, at least their base is happy.
So, Brad, you wouldn't argue that the economy is anything but strong right now. And is that, channeling Stephen for a second, is that just an illusion that the economy isn't strong enough?
No, it's been building. It's been building for the past decade. It was extraordinarily weak in 2009.
So Donald J. Trump couldn't take credit for it, or?
I don't think presidents should take more credit for economies than they actually deserve, although they always do when things are good. It's only when things are bad that people frantically point fingers elsewhere, that the president regards himself essentially as Pharaoh, who took credit in the story of Joseph for the 7 fat years, and then somehow deflected the blame for the 7 lean years onto whatever their inappropriate advisors or to the weather or something else. Yeah, the U.S. economy is an absolutely wonderful thing. Here in California, our problem isn't that we're not productive enough or that we're not aggressive enough in trying to hire people. Our problem is that virtually nobody can afford to live here unless they already owned property. Elsewhere in the country, it's not that good. But it's still pretty good if you're in the middle class or above. If you're in the working class, it's still not so good because, you got hammered for a decade from 2007 on, and you still haven't made up that ground, and you probably didn't have a good enough job in those years to make you a very attractive candidate in the labor market. And although things are good, they're not yet good enough for firms to seriously start training people who don't already have skills.
Okay, but I could ask Stephen a question. I'm sure you don't agree with his assessment of the credit or blame for the economy. But you could touch on that. One is with reduced corporate tax revenue. Should we be worried about the deficit growing as a part of the whole process? And certainly feel free to respond to Brad's commentary on the economy.
Look, I helped write the economic plan for Trump, and on the campaign was very involved in, I did a lot of debates with Obama's economists and Hillary Clinton's economists. And, I guess it wasn't your boss, but you worked with them. Larry Summers basically very famously after, we had 8 years of Obama's plan. I think Barack Obama did the best that he could. I think his intentions were good. It just didn't work very well, right? We never got the economy growing very rapidly. We had the worst recovery from a recession since the Great Depression. Every year, the Obama people predicted, right? It just was. And if you look at the growth rate of the economy in the Obama recovery, it was about half the rate of a normal recovery, and about and much lower than we got. You talked about Reagan. Are you kidding me? That was the biggest economic boom in the history of the country that we saw in the 1980s. I graduated from college in 1982.
1990s
you couldn't even get a job
was
as a burger
bigger.
flipper, and we had this. The economy grew almost twice as fast in Reagan's recovery when we cut taxes than they did under Obama's recovery when we raised them. I think that's pretty strong evidence. By the way, look, I think Bill Clinton was one of the great presidents. Under Bill Clinton, government spending fell from 21% of GDP to almost 17.5%. It was the biggest retraction of government that we saw since the end of World War II. Yeah, the economy grew great under Bill Clinton because we cut the hell out of government spending. That's a good thing. We removed that money from the government and put it in the private sector. Now, the reason I bring up these debates that I had with the Obama and Clinton economists, and I brought up Larry Summers, is they all basically said, I must have said this 50 times. Donald Trump is lying to the American people when he says we can grow the economy at 3%. Larry Summers said no, 2% is the absolute best the U.S. economy can do. And my goodness, if the Messiah couldn't get us to 3% growth, then how is Donald Trump going to get us there? Well, guess what? We now know what the growth rate for the U.S. economy was in 2018, right about 3.1%, which I believe is above 3%. That's something that liberals said it was impossible. In fact, Barack Obama said very famously 3 weeks before the election, he said, how is Donald Trump going to bring back all these manufacturing jobs, and how is he going to get to 3% growth? Does he have a magic wand? Well, maybe Donald Trump does have a magic wand because we do have 3% growth. By the way, one of the things we're really proud of, in terms of you're talking about the middle class, Brad, since Donald Trump was elected, we have created 1 million manufacturing and construction jobs. Those high-paying good-paying, middle-class jobs that were disappearing from middle America. It's the reason that Trump won. Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Wisconsin. Those states were bleeding. There was no recovery in Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Now you're kind of seeing it. So we're very proud of that. You're right, it's still early in the game, Brad. So, it's too early to say this was an unqualified success. We're going to have to see how it goes. But, this idea, by the way, that the Democrats wanted to make a deal with Trump on taxes, I was there. I was involved in negotiations. Democrats said hell no to it there was no deal to be put on the table. I mean, this is a sad thing, and this is the last point I'll make. In 1986, we passed what I think was one of the great bipartisan achievements in 50 years, which was something called the Tax Reform Act of 1986. I don't know if you remember, but we cut the highest income tax rate from 50% down to 28%. Every American got a reduction in the rates, and we broadened the tax base. That bill, none of you are going to believe this, but you can look it up. That bill to cut the highest income tax rate to 28%, that passed 97-3. 97-3. It was people like Bill Bradley. It was people like Lloyd Bentsen. It was people like Sam Nunn. It was people like Ted Kennedy. It was people like Howard Metzenbaum that voted for a 28% tax rate. Now, it pains me to say this, we've got Democrats running around the country saying, let's raise the tax rate to 70, 80, 90%. Ladies and gentlemen, this is economic lunacy that we're hearing from folks. If you want to decapitate the economy, raise our tax rates to 70%, you're going to see the biggest outflow of jobs ever. We got to lower the rates to make America competitive, not raise them.
Very quickly, Stephen, should we be worrying about the deficit?
Yeah, but one of the things that we always said from the start with Donald Trump, because the debt is right now we're at about 80% of GDP. And by the way, let's just to get the statistics out here. From the day that Barack Obama entered the office till the day he left, we raised the national debt from $10 to $20 trillion. So I find it really funny, all these Democrats saying, oh, we can't raise the debt. Wait, you doubled the national debt in 8 years. In other words, the debt went up under Barack Obama more than every president from George Washington through George Bush. Is the debt a problem? At 80% of GDP, it's not a crisis. But if we go up to 150% of GDP, yeah, then we start looking like countries like Greece, and we look like Detroit, and we look like Puerto Rico. One of the points we made to Trump from the very start was you have to get the economic growth rate up. We can't keep having this Obama growth rate of 1.9%. It's not going to deliver the results. We put into the computer models not 1.9%, 3.25% growth. If we can keep maintaining 3.25% growth, which I think we're very capable of doing, the debt as a share of GDP is going to fall every year for the next 20 years. So it's all, not exclusively, but growing the economy, getting Americans off of welfare into jobs is the best way to reduce the deficit.
Brad, are jobs going back to the Rust Belt? Is that happening?
No.
Have you been there?
Or not more than the country as a whole, right? That the country as a whole is doing okay. The Rust Belt is still not. One thing that makes it hard to argue with Republicans is they see the Reagan administration through remarkably rose-colored glasses. Yeah? And when we look at it, we kind of say, all right, we'll say how much did federal revenue go up during the Reagan's 80s? And
doubled.
we get numbers like doubled.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of inflation at the start. And there's a large amount of population growth because of the baby boom, and because that was when we actually had higher immigration. Adjust for inflation, adjust for population growth, you kind of get an 18% increase over the Reagan years, which Steve wants to say is a double. But, the 1970s produced 25% and produced more than a tripling, if you do it in nominal terms. The Clinton 1990s slightly did less than a double in terms of nominal terms, but if you adjust for population, the Clinton years raised it by 40%. That the decade that looks really great from the standpoint of growth per person, growth per worker, and also real wages for the average person That's the 90s. That's the Clinton 90s. That's not the Carter Ford 70s. That's not the Reagan 80s. And God knows that's not the George W. Bush 2000s. And it certainly isn't the Obamas.
Are we seeing
Although he can
real
claim-
wage growth now?
Not yet. You don't yet see it. The labor market looks remarkably strong if you look at unemployment, the unemployment rate. But it looks not yet so remarkably strong if you look at the share of, say, prime age people, 25 to 54, who are working. We'd hope that it's the unemployment rate that really matters, that the people whose counterparts would have been working in 1999 but aren't working now are doing something reasonable and great, taking care of parents, getting their heads together, kicking back and enjoying themselves. But, you know, it doesn't look like that. It looks like the unemployment rate may be giving us a false signal because we aren't yet seeing the kinds of wage increases that we would want to see, given how low unemployment is, and that we would in fact expect to see, given how low unemployment is.
So we're sitting in California.
Yeah.
And I think I want to separate immigration and the wall out. They're related, but they're separate issues in that in California, our growth in the economy has been so much due to immigration, real value brought by immigrants. And today, Silicon Valley companies are crying out, and I think legitimately, that it's hard to grow when you're not able to bring in talented people from around the world who are going to be able to contribute to our economy. How does immigration at this moment in time either contribute or being limited by the economy nationally and in California?
Look, I'm very pro-immigrant. I think immigrants are one of our greatest assets, you know, as a nation. It's one of the reasons I'm so bullish on America, you know, because we have opportunity that no other country in the world has. We can get the best and brightest and hardest working people to come from every land in the world and come to the United States. I gave a talk out at Microsoft, you know, about 6 months ago to their technology people. There are probably about 300 people there. I look out at this room, and it's like the United Nations. I mean, and people from all over the world.
Now, why can't we hear more Republicans just say that? Okay, punto.
Yeah.
It's really great. We need immigrants. We're strong when we have it. That's one point. Then we can talk about how we do legal immigration, right? But
and by the way, you know, I always say that the single biggest issue for the world, you know, it's certainly for America over the next 10, 20, 50 years, especially I say this to high school, college kids, it's not climate change and all this stuff. The single most important issue is what country will be the economic superpower of the planet over the next 50 years. For the last 75 years, the United States has been the unchallenged rival. Well, now we have a rival in China, and I think that's why we're doing, you know, everything we've done, you know, we've tried to do under Trump is just try to make America more competitive so we can outgrow these other countries. And I always say, you know, I met with the economic minister of China the other day, and he was saying, "Oh, we're gonna outgrow America in 5 years. We're gonna be, you know, a more, you know, bigger economy and stronger than the U.S." I said that I can tell you, sir, that's not going to happen. And the reason that's not going to happen, I can tell you this with all assurance, is because our Chinese are so much smarter than your Chinese. You know, and that's a joke, guys. But, you know, I mean, look, it's not only a partial joke. I mean, we do get their best and brightest. We get the best and brightest from India. So we got to get immigrants into this country. We probably need more immigrants because if we're going to get that 3.25 growth, we're going to need a bigger workforce, and we've got people retiring. So we should expand that. And look,
and
the reason I'm with Trump,
told Trump that, and nobody's told
let me just
Trump's
make one last
INS
point
that.
on the immigration, and I said this at the earlier meeting, but I'll say it again. I think it's important. We're not, I've worked on this immigration for 30 years, so, and on the politics side, on the policy side. We cannot get real pro-America, pro-growth, and a generous immigration system in place, because we're dealing with a law that's 50 years old, until we get the border secure. And by that, and I don't just mean, you know, you say, well, the border is secure.
Yeah.
What I mean is you need the American people to believe that Washington is making a good faith effort to do it. That's why the wall, look, maybe the wall is just symbolism. Maybe, you know, look, I think there are a lot, I'm kind of agnostic about it. But build the damn wall, get the border secure, and then we can get an immigration reform that does the kind of things that you're talking about. But I'll tell you this, until the American people believe that the wall, that the border is secure, then I don't think we're going to get the immigration reform that we want.
Brad,
And
we need
from
a
your
wall in order to get
perspective- From your
immigration?
perspective, the fact that the border is already secure, that terrorists do not
Americans
cross
don't
the border.
believe that. You
And
know,
why don't Americans believe that?
because they're seeing what's going on at the border. You're seeing
They're not seeing
they
what's
see the
going on
drugs,
at the border.
They see there are a lot of, look, I've been to the border. There are a lot of problems at the border today. I mean,
Yeah, and Pete Wilson tried to run on this in 1994 in California, that the border was not secure and that people coming up from Mexico were a great threat to the state of California. They were using our services, they were dirtying our streets, they were committing lots of crimes, that Hispanics in California were a strong negative. And he won one election as governor of California for that. And after that, the California Republican Party started on its great downward spiral. As people looked around and say, hey, what do you know? He told us a lot of bullshit. The border is not a threat to us. What's going on at the border is not a threat to us. Terrorists are not crossing the border to try to kill us. Drug lords are sending stuff across the border, but that's because our demand is so high, and the drug trade is a much bigger problem for Mexican public order than for ours. Yes, we need to work on that. No, a wall would not help that. I would say the key question is, why is your boss so eager to convince America that the border is not secure, rather than taking a realistic view of the situation? And why is he staking his presidency on something that he would not, during the campaign, say was worthwhile for Americans to pay for? Remember, Trump's line during the campaign wasn't, we need to pay for more border security. It was, we need to build a wall, and Mexico is going to pay for it. Mexico ain't going to pay for it. So why does he still want to build a wall? If he didn't think it was worth doing without Mexico paying for it in the campaign, why does he think it's worth doing now? I think only because he genuinely does not like immigrants. And he also knows that if he riles up his base, maybe he can get them scared enough to still vote for him if they think the border is drastically insecure.
So, Brad, if I could ask a question.
Prayer rugs,
Okay, let me
right?
say one
Prayer
thing about
rugs.
that.
Last
Okay.
week.
We had
Last
35
week.
we had
No,
just-
last week. Last week, we had Donald Trump talking about how they'd found prayer rugs for terrorists crossing the border. This isn't a thing. This is a plot point in Day of the Soldado. And yet, he thinks this is going on. And people like you who talk to him are letting him believe that this is what is going on. You say, yes, Mr. President, rather than saying, wait a minute, what we really need is a lot more immigration. And that even illegal immigrants, right, that they're people who work like dogs, who want a better life for themselves and their children, are a net asset to the country. And yet, because you all who talk to Trump, and it won't be brave, the country has a much bigger problems than it should.
Okay, let's
Well,
give
look,
Stephen a
no,
chance
this is
to
let me just
respond
make
to that.
one comment on this. Look, there are 12 million illegal immigrants in this country.
Yeah.
We think. That's
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, you go to places, and look, I was on the campaign. We went to Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, those Midwestern states.
Filled
And-
with illegal immigrants, I tell
Yeah,
you.
and
The
no,
number you
there
see
are a lot of
more
illegal-
illegal
and-
immigrants in a day in Iowa than you see
Okay,
in
I'm
a
just gonna
month
make a
in
pure political
California.
point. If Democrats want to run on a platform that they don't think that there's a crisis at the border, you're going to lose 40 states. I mean, the fact is, the American people are sick and tired of illegal immigration, period. And if the Democrats' position is we're not going to do anything about it, then that's not a very productive stance to take from a policy point of view and a political point of view. There's a lot of things we have to do. If we want to stop illegal immigration, we have to get rid of sanctuary cities. We have to get rid of catch and release. We have to get rid of giving welfare benefits to illegal immigrants. We've got to do things that stop, saying come on into our country. They have to come in legally. They have to come in lawfully. I'm in favor of dramatically expanding legal immigration, but we've got to make sure that when immigrants come into this country, it's through an orderly and lawful and legal way, and I think that's where 70% of the American people are.
Okay,
So you're
we just
opposed
had
to
we just
every
had a
form-
government shutdown over this, and we're not going to solve it on stage. All right, so
Yeah.
thank God it's over. I hear. Okay, at least for 3 weeks. So let's shift. Now, A lot of emotion there. It's all really good stuff.
Yeah.
China. I got a lot of questions about the China trade deal because this economy looks really great right now. But I think my guess is that you both would agree that if we don't solve the current China trade issue, then this economy is under great risk. Stephen, maybe you could go first.
So I'll just make a quick point about this. Look, when people ask me what can go wrong with this economy, there's three things. Number one, the Fed is guilty of economic malpractice with the rate increases when we got no inflation. We've got, in my opinion, deflation. I guess I would even agree with you that Janet Yellen would be a big improvement over Jerome Powell. He's incompetent, and he's the one who caused the 3,000 point decline in the Dow because of his craziness. We need to actually be putting more money into the economy, not less. That's number one. Number two, and this is the big one. We have to get this China trade deal done. I'd say it is the single biggest issue for our country. We've got 30 days from now until that 90-day deadline ends. I am praying every time I say my prayers at night that call comes from President Xi to Trump saying, let's make a deal here. Look, I am of the opinion that China, and I think most Americans are of this opinion, and I think Trump deserves a lot of credit for being the first president to make this point. China is no longer a friend. They are no longer an ally. They are an enemy and an adversary. We are in a Cold War with China, ladies and gentlemen. Look at what's happening with their military buildup. Their military buildup. You're seeing they're hacking into our computer systems now. They're involved in industrial espionage. They're stealing $350 billion of our technology. A lot of it that's created here in Silicon Valley. So everything Trump is asking for is extremely reasonable. We want a level playing field. We want them to lower their tariffs. We want to stop them with the subsidies. We want them to pay for our intellectual property. If we can get a deal done with China, and I pray that it happens, I think you're going to see the economy explode. If it doesn't, Trump's going to hit them with this 25% tariff. It's going to be bad for both countries, but it's going to kill China. And that's why I keep saying, let reason prevail. Get this done, and both countries will be better off.
Before you respond, because I know you want to respond, Brad, if Xi does not call Trump and acquiesce to his demand, is Trump mistaken for trying to up the ante?
No, he's not. I mean, this is the fight of our lifetime, folks. We are in a epic struggle right now with China. This is a good time to pick a fight with them. We have a very strong economy. Their economy is faltering. Their stock market's down by 30%. This is exactly the right time to pick this fight with China, and we cannot back down on this one. We have to keep tightening the screws and tightening, and it's very simple. If we can't trade with China, we sneeze. If they can't trade with us, they catch pneumonia. Trump understands the idea of leverage. We have leverage over China. We've got it now. I don't know if 20 years we're going to have that kind of leverage.
Okay, Brad, how much do you agree with that point of view?
This is simply delusional. That we had leverage vis-a-vis China, or the Obama administration was kind of interested in good policy and was trying to build leverage with China over intellectual property. And indeed, this is something that always happens. In the 19th century, the United States did not pay a cent to Britain for its intellectual property in textiles and steel. In fact, we did not pay a cent to Charles Dickens for all of his novels that we pirated. In fact, even in the 1950s, we stole J.R.R. Tolkien's intellectual property for The Lord of the Rings. Did not pay him a cent in royalties because our laws had a loophole, so we didn't have to. And that's one reason The Lord of the Rings got so popular, right? They could print it. It was a good book. They didn't have to pay any royalties.
Thank God we didn't steal blood pudding. That's all I have to say.
Similarly, Japan. When Japan was industrializing, right, they didn't pay an awful lot of attention to our intellectual property and were annoyed. And now China is doing the same thing. This is always a thing that rising powers do when they're confronted with a technology gradient and an established superpower. China's doing it to us. Japan did it to us. We did it to Britain. It's a source of annoyance. It's a thing to negotiate about. We have things, they don't. We push, we pull. It doesn't change the fact that the international trade relationship, whether between Britain and the United States in the 19th century or Japan and America in the mid-20th century or the US and China today, is an enormous win-win thing. We're just arguing about the division of this enormous surplus from the global division of labor. And that's a good and normal thing to do. Now, the Obama administration decided that it wanted to take a harder line with China on intellectual property, which was appropriate, and said, how do we do this? Well, first we get everyone who might agree with us. We get all of other China's trading partners on our side. We form this organization called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And this organization called the Trans-Pacific Partnership will then negotiate with China with a lot of leverage. And indeed, back then, you and Art Laffer were writing all kinds of nice op-eds about how the TPP was good for America and about how Marco Rubio was to be complimented because he'd been willing to give America trade bumps to negotiate with the North and so on and so forth, that TPP would give us leverage to strike a deal with China on intellectual property. And then, lo and behold, someone convinces Trump that the TPP is the second worst trade deal in American history, is almost as bad as NAFTA. And Trump, not a terribly wise person. Jared Kushner finds this guy, Peter Navarro, who seems to be simply delusional. And for some reason, Robert Lighthizer, who was an effective free trade technocrat back in the Reagan and Bush administrations, is doing things that I can only stand as corrupt. And now, as near as I can see it, only Trump, Navarro, and Lighthizer in the White House actually like what they're doing with trade in China. And a big problem is that Trump is insisting on bilateral balance with China, which ain't going to happen, right? That truly balanced trade would involve the United States having a trade deficit with China, and China having a trade deficit with some of the countries elsewhere in Eurasia that it's importing resources from. And those countries that export resources to China then having a trade deficit with us, and the total global balance in trade being a triangular balance. We're not going to get there as long as we have a big federal deficit, but if we were going to get to balanced trade, it would involve a large trade deficit of us with China, and yet that's what Trump wants to eliminate.
So are you worried in 30 days?
No, I'm worried. I'm genuinely worried because she is looking at this situation and he sees, A, Trump is delusional. He seems to want something, balanced bilateral trade, that isn't going to happen. B, he threw away all his negotiating power when he didn't sign the TPP, that if there were 12 countries here, we'd have leverage. And instead, there's only one, and the U.S. won't sell to us. We can do something else. The U.S. wants to threaten us. We'll cut off U.S. imports of soybeans, which will do an awful lot of nasty things to farmers in Iowa. And we'll buy our soybeans from Brazil. And it'll be a little more expensive, but it's going to impose pain on Trump's political coalition. So Xi is sitting there thinking, what's going on? That either this is all a big bluff, because someone who was genuinely serious about intellectual property would not have thrown away his leverage to start with, and would not be demanding something that simply ain't going to happen no matter what, balanced bilateral trade. Either it's a bluff or this is simply someone who cannot be reasoned with. And so we're going to kind of have to do what other people do, what the Mexican government did. The Mexican government was faced with Trump, who thought that claimed to think NAFTA was not the second worst, but the worst trade deal in American history. And lo and behold, changed the name of NAFTA to, what is it, Canadian, U.S., Mexican Free Trade Agreement or something, and have some very minor adjustments in what counts as domestic auto parts production, adjustments that U.S. auto manufacturers didn't really want and don't really care about. And all of a sudden, instead of being the worst trade deal in American history, NAFTA's something perfectly fine that Trump is way competent happy to sign and is extraordinarily proud of.
Okay, I need to ask Stephen a question.
So Xi is betting that Trump will fold here again as he folded with NAFTA. And Xi thinks if Trump doesn't fold, well, this isn't really a rational agent we're dealing with. It's hard to figure out how we can actually strike a deal with an administration that consists, where the decision makers consist of one guy who isn't wise, one guy who's delusional, one guy, Lighthizer, who looks corrupt with him, and a bunch of other people in the White House who are kind of staring on the situation with horror.
Okay, I have to get a statement here. So are you persuaded now that bilateral trade agreements are better than multilateral? Yeah. And if so, why? And, you know, did NAFTA really change in this new, was it dramatic, or was it just simply some window dressing?
So I'll answer your second question first.
Okay.
Look, I helped put NAFTA together in the first place, and we did that under Bill Clinton, by the way, and I was working for Newt Gingrich at the time. I think NAFTA was one of the great policy triumphs. You know, I talked about the 1986 Tax Reform Act being one of the great bipartisan achievements. I would put NAFTA up there. I think NAFTA was look, there were problems with NAFTA, but on balance, it was hugely beneficial to the U.S., Canada. And by the way, the country that benefited by far the most from NAFTA was Mexico. And we need to keep Mexico. We don't want Mexico to go the direction of Venezuela, Cuba, and so on. And so it was a big triumph. And so I always told Trump, you know, look, I'm not some kind of sycophant for Donald Trump. I say on TV when I disagree with him. I totally disagree with him on NAFTA. I disagree with him on the auto tariffs. I think the auto tariffs are stupid. I think the steel tariffs, I think his heart is in the right place. He actually does care about those middle-class steel workers and auto workers in the Midwest, but that's not the way you save their jobs. It's through protectionism. I'm totally with them on China, though. Look, I think China this is like the new Soviet Union. I mean, they have the difference between China today, Brad, in my opinion, and, you know, the last 30 years before that, is China's moving in the wrong direction on every front. They're building up their military in a very aggressive and dangerous way, circa Japan in the 30s. They are engaged in incredible human rights violations. There's no free. They've moved in completely the wrong direction on freedom of press, and things like that. We should wake up to this, and we can't just pretend that it isn't happening. So I hope that, I pray that you're wrong where the Chinese think that Trump is bluffing, because he is not bluffing here. I guarantee you, if they don't have this deal, if they don't at least have something in 30 days, they're going to get walloped with this 25%.
So what deal could they offer that he would accept?
Well,
they can't get to bilateral balance no matter what.
Well,
so what deal would Trump offer that they would accept?
I'm not Donald Trump, so I can't answer to him, but if I were advising him, by the way, I do think there's a big difference between NAFTA and this. Your analysis of what happened with NAFTA is exactly right. I mean, you know, the new NAFTA is not much different. We don't remember, we don't call it NAFTA any longer. Yep. And that was kind of a wise political solution to get out of a bad situation. By the way, I don't know how we're going to get we need your help to get the Democrats in Congress, you know, to pass it, because we don't right now have a single Democrat. Where are the free trade Democrats? What happened to them? But on China, no, we need to. I think Trump can't buckle here, and I think what he needs is reductions in their tariffs and agreements to buy more of our stuff, our manufactured products, our agriculture products, our energy products, and that kind of thing. And if that happens, you know, then I think Trump would take a deal, and I think the market will go through. That would be.
You understand Xi's problem right now, given that he's looking at us. That back before Christmas, we had what was supposed to be a deal on the continuing resolution. We had Pelosi, Ryan, McCarthy, Schumer, McConnell, Trump had reached a deal.
Sorry,
and McCarthy and McConnell.
What deal are you talking about?
Back last month, McConnell and Schumer passed the continuing resolution unanimously through the Senate, and then the House was set to pass it all but unanimously. But then Trump watches Fox and Friends, and Fox and Friends slag the deal, and Trump all of a sudden announces he won't sign his own deal. And Paul Ryan, who's then desperate not to embarrass Trump, wouldn't let the House vote on what they'd all agreed on 2 days before. Ryan goes out, Pelosi comes in on January 4th, Pelosi passes the deal through the House. But because it's the new congressional session, now the Senate wants to pass it.
So what's your
McConnell, desperate not to embarrass Trump, has been hemming and hawing for a month. And now it looks like, a month later, $10 billion down the toilet for the country, not $10 billion transferred from one country to another place to another, not $10 billion not spent optimally, $10 billion simply poured down the toilet later. Apparently we have a deal. And it looks to me to be the same deal that Fox and Friends slagged that morning back in December, and that caused Trump to go back on his word and say he would not sign something everyone had been assured he would sign 2 days before.
So you're pointing to a dysfunction in government.
How is she supposed to deal with this situation?
Okay.
Especially as you don't speak for Trump, I don't speak for Trump, and Trump doesn't speak for Trump. It's the hosts on Fox and Friends who speak for Trump.
Okay, I want to shift for a second. We're in California today, Stephen. We have the 5th largest economy in the world if we were a nation, our state. Silicon Valley is very robust. Technology sector has great promise. Should we feel good about our economy as Californians?
Phew, I love California. I mean, I love the reason I came out here, and one of the reasons to accept this invitation to come. I just love the state. I love the weather. I love the mountains. I love the beauty. I love the people. I love the universities. I mean, California is truly one of the great places on earth. I'm not bullish on California right now. I think California has big problems. And I think the thing that worries me most about California is that you, and I don't mean the people in this room, California the residents don't seem to understand how much trouble that you're in. You have the highest income taxes in the country. You have the highest sales taxes in the country. You have the highest gas taxes in the country. You have the most regulations of any state in the country. Brad, you were saying at an earlier session, now there's talk about blowing up Proposition 13. That's the only thing that kept your property taxes low. And Proposition 13, in my opinion, was what created the boom. It was right after Proposition 13. California went through its biggest boom in the history of the state. So I'm worried about California. People say how wonderful the economy is here, and look, there's a lot of great things happening in California. You also have the highest poverty rate of any state in the country, adjusted for cost of living. You also have some of the worst schools in the country, even though you spend a lot of money on schools. You've also got you're losing a lot of talent in California. Over the last 10 years, for the first time in American history, according to the latest Census Bureau report, 1 million more Californians moved out of California than other American residents moved into California. I mean, how do you do that? How do you actually impel people to leave here?
Because we don't build anymore. Because we don't build enough houses.
I'm not optimistic about California.
Okay.
I think really you need fundamental change in the way you tax, regulate your pensions. If you get those solved, then I'll be really bullish about California.
But right now you're not bullish on California.
Because we don't build enough houses. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, people like my uncle Brad stops being a San Francisco neurosurgeon and moves to a palatial estate out in Idaho, sells his property in San Francisco to immigrants who then work to Silicon Valley. And it's true my uncle Brad occasionally wishes he were back in San Francisco, but he made a whole bunch of money selling his real estate and moving elsewhere. It's not that California is unattractive, right? It's that California is too attractive, and that we haven't built enough houses. We have not poverty. Because our workers are unproductive. We have poverty because our housing prices are out of this world. God, what a real estate mess we have. It's a huge problem, but it's a problem that's rooted in the fact that the California economy as a whole is so strong, that we are so productive, and this is such a nice place to live. While my 28-year-old is sending me pathetic emails from Silver Spring, Maryland, where he's working on pharmaceutical prices and he's in the throes of the polar vortex. Look, Proposition 13, we disagree massively on Proposition 13. As I read Proposition 13, it was a nice tax cut for people who got it, but it had political economy effects that were totally disastrous in the long run. The fact that property taxes have been capped means that local governments have looked for the past generation at development with fear. Where are we going to find the money to provide services to all of these projects, given that we can't collect them through property taxes? And this means that local governments have switched from being boosters to being NIMBYists. And you add to the regular NIMBYists out there, who are the people who kind of sit in my neighborhood in Elmwood in Berkeley and who think it still should be a neighborhood of single-family houses, as it was when they just replaced the pear orchard long before it was at the core of a metropolitan area of 6 million people, located a mile south of the university, a mile north of Rockridge BART. In any sane land planning situation, this should be triple deckers and townhouses. 5 stories, some apartment buildings instead of us sitting here in our 3,500 square foot single family high peaked colonial house a block from Ashby College and living the good life. This is a governance disaster, right? The fact that our local government, that people don't just vote for NIMBYists, that the bureaucrats in planning become NIMBYists and the budgeteers become NIMBYists, because how can we pay for the services these developments will require? If you own property, of course, it's great. If you're lucky enough to have a wire into the bureaucracy so you can easily get permits, it's great. Otherwise, we really need to fix this, and we really need to fix this now. That California will not have a job shortage or a job quality problem or a real kind of productivity poverty problem for the next 2 decades or so, but we already have a massive housing problem. Country as a whole, right? The country as a whole does need more investment and does need a lot of attention paid to the middle and working classes, and not just in terms of making it easy for them or making housing affordable, in terms of making people productive. And there, I think, is, that we kind of lost 8 years, largely when George W. Bush was president. I would say that Obama was kind of firing only on half cylinders in terms of economic policy and growth policy, largely because he kind of kept assuming that things would naturally get better, that the economy would naturally bounce back from the business cycle when it wasn't going to naturally bounce back. And now it looks like we're losing another 4 years.
Do you think that California is unique in the United States in terms of having a housing deficit?
Well,
we have a uniquely big housing deficit. We have a uniquely big housing deficit.
Yeah.
Boston has problems. Chicago has smaller problems. Washington, D.C., greater Washington, D.C., has not yet Boston or Chicago problems, but has kind of grow problems. And New York City, because of its sheer size, has kind of a different order of problems. 25 million people rather than 6 million people has problems. We would have problems here because we have this huge bay in the middle of our metropolitan area, and we don't use water. We don't have high-speed hydrofoils to get everywhere across it.
So, Steve, should the federal government be providing leadership on this? If it's not just a California problem, but it's
you mean on housing? Or?
Yeah.
Look, I'm not really an expert on housing, so I'll just say this. I listened to what Brad just said, and what you said, it just doesn't add up. You're basically saying you have a big real estate crisis, and therefore you want to raise taxes on real estate. As I look at it, when you tax something, you get less of it, not more of it. So if you get rid of Proposition 13, and you think you got a real estate problem now and a housing crisis, you get rid of Proposition 13, you're going to have the biggest housing crisis ever. But look, I do know about these other states. Yeah. I mean, I've written a number of books called The Wealth of States, Rich States, Poor States. I mean, what's going on in America, and it's plain as white snow, is that the blue states of America are cratering right now. And look what's happening, Brad, in the 3 states that are in the worst financial shape by far are New Jersey, Connecticut, and my home state of Illinois. All very high tax states. California is, in my opinion, not far behind because you believe you can tax and spend your way out of every problem. The solution to the housing problem is very simple. Donald Trump is solving it. We are creating more economic growth and more jobs and higher paying jobs. That way people can afford to buy housing. They don't have to go homeless if they have a good paying job. The best
I'm
way to solve
afraid
that.
there are lots of people who are going to go homeless in California who have or are capable of having lots of high paying jobs. You'd be right if we actually had a housing market. The problem is that local governments have much too much of a stranglehold on what can be built where.
I agree
And
with
so
that.
we're more like the Soviet Union in
I agree
terms
with
of
that.
development.
That's a big part of the problem.
And
Okay,
I think that's the core of the problem, and it needs a political economy solution. Somehow you have to convince
You get rid
local
of your land
bureaucracies.
use controls, you get rid of your high taxes and things like that.
Yeah,
and
you
your
know, and
regulations, you'll have more.
I'd say that some federal intervention conditioning, say, some part of our Medi-Cal money on us actually making successful progress in terms of making housing affordable might well be a useful spur to get people.
Let me
in
just make one last
Sacramento
comment about
thinking
this,
how to
because
fix
this is important for you all to
Yeah.
hear. Good. I feel like I want to talk to the whole state of California. I think states like California, states like Illinois, states like New Jersey, states like Connecticut have these massive deficits, like these huge pensions. You all know this. You've got massive unpayable pensions. If anyone is in this room is under the illusion that somehow people in Pennsylvania and Maine and Michigan and Ohio and Virginia are going to pay higher federal taxes to bail out California, I guarantee that's not happening. You're going to have to solve this problem yourself. There's no federal bailout coming.
Okay.
We
All right.
paid higher federal taxes to bail out Texas's savings and loans in 1991,
we're not bailing out. I mean, look,
Does this work only one way? Does this come only from blue states to red states and never from
You
red
actually
states
think
to blue
people in
states?
Michigan should have to pay for your inflated government benefits here?
I don't think we don't face a
California?
crisis yet.
I don't-
Texas
I
faced
don't
a
think so.
crisis
It ain't
in
happening.
91, 92.
Okay, we've had so much agreement today.
Yes.
That
Actually, we
I'd like
had a
to-
lot more agreement when in our first
Yeah,
panel
no,
than we had
exactly.
this
So
one.
this is
More
no,
economic.
you know,
we had
that's great.
we had
Great.
fewer claims that we were in the middle of a new Cold War with China in
I think
the
we
earlier
are.
one.
Okay,
How many
so
agreements that we're in a Cold War with China? Anyone?
okay, there's a if you're listening
Not
audience,
many.
we had about 5 people, but we are in San Francisco. Thank you. I think. Do you think maybe, Stephen, that Trump would have more moral authority if he would treat Russia with the same standard that he treats China? Lack of freedom, lack of human rights. Don't you think there's a disjunction there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, this is one of the things that bothers me the most about Donald Trump. I don't understand this weird, I don't know anything about it. I honestly don't follow all this, collusion, blah, blah, blah. But I will say this, that there's something weird about this, that he acts as, look, Russia is a huge problem on the international scene, too. There's a big difference, though.
Yeah.
Russia is a third world country, right? All they have is oil. They don't produce anything. China is a real challenge, and I think that's the...
Okay. All right. So we have time for one last question. What's that?
No, well,
Yeah, no.
I don't know. Look, back when oil prices cratered and when the ruble cratered as well, my wife, one of her grandparents came from Russia, said, let's go to Russia. Moscow now is half off. Right? So we went to Russia and hung out for a week, and in one hotel room we stayed, there was a sign saying Jacques Chirac stayed in this hotel room when he came here for the summit of such and such, the French president. And I looked at Anne-Marie and I said, do you think they took the bugs out? I'm sure there are pictures of my wife and me doing interesting things in the Federal Security Bureau
Okay,
offices
we
right
can
now.
all have hypothetical thoughts.
that-
Okay, last question.
that's a
We don't have
potential
time.
threat.
We have last
Okay.
question.
All right.
Stephen, you have a magic wand now. What's one thing you can do over the next year and a half to make America's economy great? And the same question for Brad. What's one thing you would do?
Can you have Brad go first? I want to think about that.
Okay, Brad, what's one thing you would do?
Have someone somehow convince Trump that Fox and Friends start saying that Trump has already won his struggle with China.
Okay.
Just say that every morning, say that constantly, that you've already won for your struggle with China, and now it's going to behave better, and this is a great victory, Mr. President.
Okay.
Then the whole bunch of our problems would go away.
I think it's China. I think it's you can't back down on China. This is the epic struggle of our age, and we have to win here as a country. We have to rally, even if you don't like Donald Trump, we have to rally around America here to make sure that we are not engaged in this continued abusive relationship with China. And if it works out, as I said earlier, if we get this trade deal done with China, the stock market's going to 30,000. If we don't get a trade deal done, I think the stock market could go down to 20. I mean, this is a big deal for the immediate economy, but our long-term growth of a nation is let's force China to play by the rules, play fair, a level playing field, stop cheating, stop lying, stop stealing.
And if I could ask us a more personal question, where would you like to spend your time over the next 2 years?
You mean
Yeah, professionally.
Locational
or Patagonia hiking maybe, but professionally, where would you like to spend the next couple of years? Where do you see yourself going?
in the Oval Office.
Yeah, okay.
That scares a lot of people. Look, I love what I do. I love what I do. If Donald Trump called and asked me to go, work for him, I certainly would do that. My bet, how great is it that Larry Kudlow is the most important economist in the country? I mean, I love Larry, and so I may go over to the White House, but I love what I'm doing, and that's a nice thing to be able to do what you love.
Okay, Brad?
Larry's no happier with Navarro and Lighthizer than I am.
Some
I
truth to that.
guarantee you.
Brad, how about
I
yourself?
guarantee you, Larry's no happier.
Are you happy at Berkeley? Or
He wants to work for President Elizabeth Warren. That's what he wants to
Actually,
do.
no. Back in the 2000s, I actually staked out a marker saying that I thought that Hillary Clinton had proved herself to be a lousy manager of the healthcare reform effort in 1993 and 94, and that she had no business running for president.
Okay.
Which made me very uncomfortable company in a number of circles.
So what do you want
Okay,
to be?
well-
What do you want to be doing in the next 2 years?
I think I'm doing what I do best. I think that sitting in Berkeley and trying to educate the people and also have a good time with my students is where I'm best placed in the world.
What about you?
and
And I only hope that policy in Washington becomes more rational.
yeah. In my spare time, I create companies that are economically profitable and create benefits for people and planet. So I need both. So there's a beverage called Rebel. I've got a technology company called Velocity. All those companies are very successful financially, but they're creating a better climate and a better world. So that's what I want to be doing.
Are we done, by the way, now? Or?
We are now done because Brad DeLong, professor of economics at the University of California at Berkeley, former U.S. Department Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy under President Clinton. Thank you.
And you're very welcome.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful fun.
And Stephen Moore, Chief Economist at the Heritage Foundation, former economic advisor to Donald Trump, author of the book Trumponomics. We want to thank our audience here.
Can I just say I want to thank everyone for, I know you don't always agree with me, but I appreciate the kind and polite response. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, we will
And
say
you were
maybe.
a great moderator, my friend.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm David Batstone, and now this meeting of the
Thank you.
Commonwealth Club of
Okay, good luck.
California, the place where you're now.